Let me tell you, the air in Pennsylvania Dutch country is so thick you could smear it on toast. Smells like God's own bakery just collided with a dairy farm. A winning combo, if you ask me. I was rolling Big Bertha, my 18-wheeled mistress, through a stretch of Lancaster County that looked like a painting somebody's grandma made. Cornfields so green they hurt your eyes, dotted with those little horse and buggy rigs clipping along like wind-up toys in a world that forgot to wind down. They always look so serious, those folks, like they're late for a very important meeting about sorghum. Me? I was feeling anything but serious. I was feeling like a king on his chrome throne, the undisputed sovereign of the interstate. My gut was singing opera, a full-throated aria of pure satisfaction. I'd just annihilated a burger at a joint called Betty's Greasy Griddle, the kind of place you dream about on a long haul, the kind that doesn't have a website because the internet would probably melt if it got too close. It's a little cinderblock building with a buzzing neon sign that just says, "Eat." Honest advertising. Betty herself must have been 100, but she called me Hon, and moved with the kind of efficient grace that only comes from flipping a million pancakes. She served up a double bacon cheeseburger that was a work of art. 2 patties, hand-formed from fresh ground chuck, and smashed on a griddle, seasoned by decades of glorious grease. Melted American cheese, the real stuff, the kind that's more orange than yellow, drooling over the sides like a golden waterfall, onions grilled into sweet caramelized submission, and bacon so crisp it'd shatter if you looked at it wrong. The bun was a simple potato roll, but toasted in butter on that same sacred griddle, a crucial detail most places forget. I washed it down with coffee thick enough to patch a tire, served in a mug that weighed more than my ex-wife's poodle. Heaven on earth. I had the windows down, the glorious perfume of diesel mixing with fresh-cut hay, and Johnny Cash growling on the radio about a boy named Sue. Life, my friends, was a solid 10. Bertha was humming along, full of fuel, and I was full of burger. All was right with the world. And that's when I saw her, standing on the shoulder, right where the blacktop kissed a sea of cornstalks. At first I thought I was seeing a ghost, or maybe a heat-shimmer mirage brought on by burger-induced ecstasy. A girl, maybe 20, maybe a little younger, dressed like she'd just stepped out of a time machine that had crash-landed in a field of piety. Long plain blue dress that went all the way to her ankles, a little white apron that looked cleaner than my conscience, and the whole 9 yards topped off with a white bonnet tied under her chin. Her thumb was out, but it was a shy thumb, a thumb that wasn't sure it wanted to be seen, like it was embarrassed to be asking for anything. It barely peeked out from her fist. I blinked, checked my mirrors. Nope, no flashing lights. I hadn't been drinking, not since breakfast anyway. That burger was greasy, sure, but it wasn't hallucinogenic. My rig's got a lot of chrome, but it's not a funhouse mirror. This was real. A girl in a bonnet hitchhiking. It just didn't compute. It was like seeing a penguin trying to order a hot dog. "Sweet mother of mercy," I muttered, easing my boot off the gas. Big Bertha let out a long, dramatic hiss from the air brakes, like a dragon sighing after a big meal. 99% of truckers would have kept on rolling. You learn rule number 1 on day 1. You don't stop for surprises on the road. A surprise can be a cop playing possum, a jackknifed rig around the bend, or a hitchhiker who wants your wallet more than a ride. It's a lonely job, and lonely men make stupid decisions. But Sam McCarty, I'm powered by curiosity and high-octane caffeine. A girl dressed for a quilting bee hitchhiking on a state highway. That ain't just a ride. That's a story waiting to be told. And I'm a collector of stories. Good stories are better than good mileage, I always say. I pulled Bertha onto the shoulder, the whole rig groaning like an old man getting out of a chair. The gravel crunched under 80,000 pounds of American steel. The cab was a good 20 feet past her, so I watched in the big West Coast mirror as she hesitated, clutched a small cloth bundle to her chest, and then started walking towards me with these quick, bird-like steps. She looked so small and fragile next to the sheer size of the truck and trailer, like a daisy next to a skyscraper. I leaned my considerable frame across the passenger seat, a feat of engineering in itself, involving a certain amount of gut-sucking and strategic twisting, and cranked the window handle, the old-fashioned kind. I don't trust power windows. Too many points of failure. Need a lift, darling? She stopped right below the passenger door, staring up at the cab like it was a UFO. And to her, it probably was. The door handle alone was at her eye level. She had to crane her neck so far back I thought her bonnet might fall off. And man, oh man, up close. Holy smokes. This girl was built by the angels and delivered by UPS. Forget the old-timey clothes. She had these eyes, the color of a clean blue sky after a storm, and a face dusted with freckles like someone had sprinkled cinnamon on fresh cream. Her skin was pale, perfect, untouched by the smog and stress of my world. She had lips that looked like they'd never said a curse word, which, let me tell you, is a novelty for a guy like me. "Are you English?" she asked. Her voice was quiet, soft, like a kitten sneezing on a pillow. It barely carried over the idling rumble of Bertha's diesel engine. "Last I checked," I chuckled, patting my gut. "Born and raised in Ohio. That count, though my great-grandpappy was Irish, if that helps. The name's Sam." A tiny, nervous smile touched her lips. The elders call all outsiders English. "Ah, gotcha. Well, I'm about as English as a hot dog at a baseball game." I jabbed a thumb over my shoulder. "So where you headed, sister?" "I'm dragging this steel all the way to Pittsburgh." She chewed on her bottom lip, a nervous habit that was doing dangerous things to my blood pressure. Her eyes darted from my face to the endless road behind her, as if expecting a posse of angry farmers with pitchforks to appear over the horizon. "I am on Rumspringa." I'd heard of it. The Amish get-out-of-jail-free card. They let the kids run wild in the modern world for a bit to see if they like it. A test drive of sin and electricity before they commit to the farm life for good. A sort of spiritual tire kicking. Most scurry back to the safety of horse-drawn buggies and no Wi-Fi. Some, however, get a taste of freedom and never look back. I had a feeling I knew which kind she was. "Rumspringa, huh?" I grinned. "A free trial of the 21st century. Well, hop on in. First lessons on the house. The view from up here is better than from a buggy. I guarantee it." She looked at the high step up into the cab, then back at the empty highway. She took a deep breath, gathered a handful of her long skirt, and started the climb. It was not a graceful ascent. It involved a lot of fabric, a determined look on her face, and one sensible black shoe slipping on the first step. I reached down and offered a hand. She took it, her grip surprisingly firm. I hauled her up the rest of the way like a sack of particularly pretty potatoes. She settled into the passenger seat like it was a church pew, her hands folded primly in her lap, the little bundle placed carefully at her feet. The cab, with its beautiful chaos of maps, empty coffee cups, a dangling air freshener shaped like a pine tree that had given up the ghost months ago, and the lingering spirit of last week's chili dog, had never felt so unholy. She smelled like soap and sunshine, a stark contrast to my cab's usual aroma of diesel and regret. "Name's Sam," I said again, wrestling the gear shift into first. "It's a 13-speed. And finding first is like finding a specific needle in a stack of other needles. Big Bertha rumbled her approval. "I am Hannah," she whispered, her wide eyes glued to the world rushing past the windshield. The sheer speed, a blistering 65 miles per hour, seemed to mesmerize her. For her, this was probably like breaking the sound barrier. We pulled back onto the highway, and the silence inside the cab was thicker than the gravy at Betty's. I felt like I had to say something, to fill the space. I'm not good with silence unless I'm sleeping. So, what's first on the agenda for this rum thingy of yours? "Rum Springer," she corrected, her voice gentle. "I do not know. See things, I suppose. The world is very loud. Honey, you ain't heard nothing yet." I reached over and flicked on the CB radio. A blast of static filled the cab, followed by the garbled voice of some fella complaining about a four-wheeler cutting him off. "Hey, rubber duck, you got a copy on that 1020? Got a bear trap set up at mile marker 109. Better back her down." "Smokies?" she asked, her head tilted. "Like the bear from the forest fire signs?" "Exactly like him," I lied, not wanting to get into the whole history of highway patrol uniforms. They wear the hats and everything. Very serious fellas. We call 'em bears. The signs are warnings. We drove for the next hour, in a comfortable quiet that slowly turned less quiet. I did most of the talking, naturally. It's a gift. I told her about the time I hauled a truckload of rubber chickens to a warehouse in Jersey. Don't ask. I explained the sacred art of finding a decent burger in any state in the Union. She just listened, her head tilted like a curious bird, asking these soft, simple questions. "What is the purpose of a rubber chicken? Why do you call your vehicle Big Bertha? Is a chili dog a canine that is cold?" It was like showing a caveman a Zippo lighter. She was fascinated by everything, and I was fascinated by her fascination. I showed her how the air conditioning worked, and she held her hand up to the vent, her eyes wide with wonder at the cold air being made from nothing. "It is like a winter spirit trapped in your dashboard," she murmured. I explained that the truck had a small bed and a refrigerator in the back, that it was my house on wheels. She couldn't wrap her head around it. A house that moved. Then, just as we were starting to climb a long grade up into the Allegheny Mountains, the road getting twisty and the engine starting to work hard, it happened. The engine, which had been humming a happy tune of combustion and power, gave a sudden, sick cough, a sputter, then a loud, metallic clang. From deep in Bertha's guts, that sounded horrifyingly expensive. It was the sound of a $1,000 bill tearing. The whole rig shuddered like it had been shot. The RPM needle dropped like a stone thrown off a cliff. My gut, so recently happy, clenched into a tight knot of dread. I managed to coast to the shoulder, the momentum bleeding away until we were just a 40-ton paperweight on the side of the highway. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the ticking of the cooling metal. Son of a biscuit-eaten bulldog. I slammed my palm on the steering wheel. The wheel shuddered, but the engine stayed stubbornly silent. No, not now. I tried the key. Nothing. Just a sad, pathetic click, click, click. The official sound of a trucker's wallet preparing for a massacre. My day, which had been a perfect 10, had just plummeted to a solid -3. "What is wrong, Samuel?" Hannah asked, her voice laced with genuine concern. She put a hand on my arm, and for a second I forgot about the engine. Her touch was light, but it was grounding. "Engine's dead as a doornail," I grumbled, popping the hood release. The lever came off in my hand. Of course it did. It was that kind of day. I stared at the cheap piece of plastic. then threw it on the floor with a curse. Probably the alternator, or the fuel pump, or some other $1,000 gizmo designed by a guy in a lab coat who's never had to fix a damn thing on the side of a mountain. I climbed out, grunting and swearing under my breath. The sun felt hotter now, the air heavier. I gave the front tire a good, solid kick. It's a trucker tradition. Doesn't fix a damn thing, but it's satisfying. It's our version of a rain dance. I managed to pry the hood latch open with a screwdriver from my toolbox and heaved the massive hood up. It weighed a ton. I propped it and stared into the greasy, complicated heart of my livelihood. It was a maze of hoses, belts, and wires that I only halfway understood. I'm a driver, not a surgeon. I know how to check the oil and top off the fluids. For anything more serious, I call a guy named Tony, who charges by the minute and smells like garlic. Hannah appeared at my elbow, her bonnet shielding her eyes as she peered into the engine bay. She looked at the mess of machinery with an expression of intense curiosity, not fear. "Don't you worry, darlin'," I sighed, wiping a bead of sweat from my brow with a greasy hand, leaving a black streak. "I'll get on the horn, call for a tow. We'll be stuck here for a few hours, maybe a night. I'll get you a motel room. They have tiny soaps. You'll love it." She didn't answer. She was just listening. Her head was cocked, her brow furrowed. It was the strangest thing. She closed her eyes for a moment, like she was tasting a fine wine. "When you tried to start it," she said softly, her eyes snapping open. The click was too sharp and fast. "It is not the alternator. An alternator failure would have drained the battery slowly. The lights would be dim, and I do not smell unburnt fuel, so the pump is working." She pointed a delicate, shockingly clean finger toward a tangle of wires near the firewall, a spot I wouldn't poke with a 10-foot pole. "I believe your primary ignition coil relay has failed." I stared at her, then at the engine, then back at her. I must have misheard. The wind must have played a trick on my ears. My what in the what now? "The relay," she said, her tone matter-of-fact, like she was explaining how to churn butter. "It is an electromagnetic switch. A small current from your key energizes a coil, which closes a bigger switch, allowing the full battery current to flow to the ignition coil. It is a very common point of failure in systems of this age. The contacts inside corrode. It has failed in the off position." I was floored, utterly speechless. My brain felt like it had short-circuited. This girl, who probably thought a microwave was powered by black magic, was diagnosing my Detroit diesel like she had the damn blueprints tattooed on her eyelids. She was using words like electromagnetic. I thought that was something from a sci-fi movie. "Honey," I said, trying my best not to sound as dumb as I suddenly felt. "With all due respect, this ain't a spinning wheel. It's a little more complicated." She gave me a look, a calm, patient, confident look that said, without a single word, "You big, dumb, beautiful oaf." "May I see a hairpin?" A what? A hairpin?" I was convinced I was having a stroke. This had to be the burger. Without waiting for an answer, she reached up and plucked a single, black metal pin from the tight bun hidden under her bonnet. "This will be sufficient." Before I could say another word, she hitched up her long skirt, tucked it into her apron strings with a practicality that was almost shocking, climbed right onto the bumper, and leaned deep into the engine bay. Her plain blue dress was immediately smeared with grease and grime, but she didn't seem to notice or care. Her fingers, nimble and sure, disappeared into the greasy labyrinth of wires I was terrified of. I just stood there, my jaw unhinged and bouncing off the floorboards. She was humming a little tune that sounded like a church hymn while she performed brain surgery on my truck. There was a little tink, A soft scrape. I heard a faint click that was different from the sad one the ignition was making. She was in there for maybe 30 seconds, tops. "All right, Samuel." Her voice, slightly muffled, echoed from the engine compartment. "Try it now." I was skeptical. This had to be a joke, a dream, some kind of elaborate prank the universe was playing on me. Maybe Betty's burger had been laced with something after all. But I'm no fool. When a beautiful woman who hums hymns while hot-wiring your truck tells you to do something, you do it. I climbed back into the cab, took a deep breath, and turned the key. The engine didn't just start. It erupted. It roared to life with a ferocity I hadn't heard in years. It wasn't a sick cough. It was a battle cry. The whole cab vibrated with a new, raw power. I stared at the gauges on the dash, all of them sitting pretty and perfect in the green. It was running smoother than before. It sounded younger. Hannah hopped down from the bumper, wiping a perfect smudge of black grease from her cheek with the back of her hand. She held up the hairpin, now slightly bent. I created a temporary bypass for the relay. I used the pin to jump the contacts inside the relay socket. It will hold until you can get a proper replacement in Pittsburgh. I killed the engine so I could hear the crickets again, and my own thoughts. I got out of the truck and just stared at her. This wasn't just a pretty girl in a funny hat anymore. This was a wizard, a mechanical angel sent down from highway heaven. How in the name of all that's holy did you do that? I finally managed to ask. She smiled. A real, genuine smile this time that lit up her whole face. It was dazzling. My father, he is a blacksmith, but he loves to tinker with forbidden things. Old tractors, water pumps, things with engines. He says God gave man a mind to understand his creation, and an engine is just a small, loud part of it. He taught me how the world of machines sings. Each part has its own voice, its own song. Your engine was singing out of tune. "Hannah," I said, my voice thick with awe. I took a step closer. "You are a woman of many, many, many talents." Her cheeks turned a lovely shade of pink. It was a simple fix. Simple for you, maybe. I let out a big, booming laugh that probably scared the cows in the next county. I slammed the hood shut with a satisfying thump. That, my dear darling, calls for a celebration. I rummaged in the little dorm fridge behind my seat and pulled out 2 cans. One was a cold beer for me, my personal reward for being smart enough to pick her up. The other was a Red Bull I'd been saving for a brutal all-nighter through the Rockies. "Here," I said, handing her the slim, silver and blue can. A celebratory beverage of the English folk. "It's a potion of great power." She took it, turning it over and over in her hands, reading the words. "Red Bull? What does it do?" "Well," I said, cracking my beer with a satisfying psht. "The can says it gives you wings." She looked at me, then back at the can, her blue eyes wide with a delicious mix of fear and curiosity. With a tiny decisive nod, she popped the top. The hiss made her jump. She sniffed it cautiously, wrinkling her perfect nose. "It smells like lightning," she declared, "and angry bees." That's the most accurate description I've ever heard. She took a small, tentative sip. Her eyes went wider. She took another bigger gulp. I could practically see the caffeine and sugar hitting her bloodstream like a lightning strike. A little tremor ran through her. She downed the entire can in less than a minute, as if it were well water on a hot day. "Whoa," she breathed, her voice vibrating. She blinked rapidly. "I feel fizzy. My thoughts are moving faster than the buggy. It feels like 1,000 tiny lightning bugs are having a party in my veins. Is this what it feels like to be English all the time? Only on Tuesdays and when we're in a hurry." I grinned. Now for part 2 of your education. I climbed back in the cab, fired up Bertha's newly resurrected engine. It purred like a saber-toothed tiger, and cranked the radio dial. The classic rock station was in the middle of a power block. And the song that came blasting out of my speakers at full volume was AC/DC's Highway to Hell. Angus Young's opening guitar riff hit the cab like a physical blow. Hannah froze. Her body went rigid. She stared at the speakers as if they'd sprouted snakes. Livin' easy, lovin' free. Her foot started tapping, just a little twitch of her sensible shoe against the floor mat. Season ticket on a one-way ride. Her head started nodding. The white bonnet bounced in perfect time with the drum beat. By the time the chorus exploded, she was gripping the dashboard, her knuckles white, a wild, ecstatic, unbelievable grin spreading across her face. "What is this glorious noise?" she shouted over the music. "It's AC/DC, I yelled back, grinning from ear to ear. "It's rock and roll." "It is the song of your people," she screamed, throwing her head back and letting out a laugh that was pure, uncut joy. It was the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. The Red Bull and the rock and roll had done more than flip a switch. They'd detonated a bomb. The quiet, shy Amish girl was vaporized. In her place was this wild thing, this force of nature. She was bouncing in her seat, her eyes sparkling with a manic energy that I knew all too well. It was the look of someone who had just discovered the world wasn't a quiet little farm. It was a goddamn rock concert with a front row seat. "This song," she said, her voice breathless as the guitar solo ripped the air to shreds. "It speaks of a road to damnation. Is this where the English wished to go?" "Some of 'em," I laughed. "Mostly we just liked the loud guitars and tellin' the man to shove it." When the song faded out, she was breathing hard, her face flushed. She turned to me, her blue eyes burning with an intensity that made the hair on my arms stand up. The fizzy energy was radiating off her in waves. "Samuel," she said, her voice no longer a whisper but a firm, clear command. "You told me of a place, a city of lights and noise and games of chance, where the only thing they worship is luck, a city in the desert that never sleeps." Yeah, Las Vegas, Sin City. "Take me there," she said. It wasn't a question, it was a royal decree. "My Rumspringa is for seeing the world of the English, is it not? I wish to see the heart of it. Take me to Las Vegas. I wish to see this shiny, loud church for myself." I looked at her. Her bonnet was crooked. The smudge of grease on her cheek was, for some reason, the sexiest thing I'd ever seen. The timid mouse from the cornfield wanted a one-way ticket to Sin City. My little Rumspringa project had just gone from 0 to 100 in the time it took to drink a can of Red Bull. My load was for Pittsburgh. Vegas was not on the way. But a trucker's route is a suggestion, not a commandment. What was a guy like me supposed to do? A beautiful mechanical genius who just mainlined caffeine, and Angus Young wanted me to drive her to Vegas. There's only one answer to that question. "Hang on tight, darling." I grinned, dropping a gear and stomping on the gas. Bertha surged forward. "We're burning daylight." The rest of the day was a beautiful, noisy blur. We blasted rock music until the speakers begged for mercy. I taught her the lyrics to Born to be Wild. She taught me the Pennsylvania Dutch words for fast, loud, and that was awesome. The Red Bull eventually wore off, but the excitement didn't. It was like she'd been a bottle of champagne shaken for 20 years, and someone had finally popped the cork. She discovered the air horn, and for 10 glorious minutes, she punctuated every classic rock chorus with a blast that echoed through the mountains. As night fell, we were deep in the winding mountain roads of western Pennsylvania. The sky was a deep velvet, studded with more stars than I'd ever seen. I found a secluded pull-off, a gravel patch overlooking a valley filled with blinking fireflies. I killed the engine and the lights. Suddenly, the only sound was the chirp of crickets and our own breathing. The energy inside the cab was thick enough to chew. We weren't talking. The dashboard lights cast a soft green and red glow on her face. She'd taken off the bonnet and set it on the dash like a trophy. Her hair was in a simple, dark brown bun, but strands had come loose, framing her face in the soft light. "Thank you, Samuel," she said, her voice back to its soft murmur, "for stopping for me. For the glorious noise." "My pleasure, Hannah," I said, my own voice a little husky. "Believe me, the pleasure is all mine." She looked at my big hand resting on the eaglehead gear shift. She reached out, her fingers lighter than a feather, and traced the outline of the chrome eagle's wing. The touch was so light, but it sent a jolt through me like I'd grabbed a live wire. My whole body tensed. Then her fingers slid from the gear shift to my hand. She didn't grab it. She just laced her fingers with mine. Her hand was small and delicate in my big, calloused paw. And that was it. Game over. Sam McCarty. Checkmated. I leaned across the center console. She met me halfway. Her lips were soft, hesitant for a split second, tasting of sugar-free gum she'd found in the glove box and pure adventure. Then, as I deepened the kiss, that wildcat energy from the highway ignited. The shyness was a distant memory. This was a woman who knew what she wanted. Things got energetic, fast. Let's just say the shocks on Big Bertha, designed to handle 40 tons of pig iron, were getting a workout they hadn't seen since that pothole outside of Cheyenne. Her old world innocence and my new world, well, me, were colliding like two freight trains in a tunnel. The cab was rocking so hard, I was worried a forest ranger would ticket me for causing a localized earthquake. Her bonnet ended up hanging from the rearview mirror like a white flag of surrender. We were in the middle of what you might call a vigorous suspension stress test, lost in our own little rocking, rumbling world, when a blinding pair of headlights sliced through the darkness, flooding the cab and turning our private little world into a public stage. We froze. The lights belonged to a black minivan that had pulled up silently behind us, the kind of vehicle that screams family, but in this context, screamed trouble. "Oh, hell," I breathed, trying to untangle myself from a very pleasant mess of limbs and long cotton skirt. Hannah's eyes were wide with pure panic. "It is them." "Them who?" I grunted, fumbling with my shirt buttons, which suddenly seemed to have multiplied. A sharp, angry, rap, rap, rap on my driver's side window made me jump a foot. Standing there, silhouetted by his own headlights, was a man who looked like he'd been carved from a block of granite, and pure disapproval. Tall, thick beard, but no mustache, traditional Amish hat, and black suit. His face was a thundercloud ready to burst. Behind him, two other guys, clones in grim-faced judgment, stood with their arms crossed. Hannah was frantically trying to make herself look respectable, which was a completely lost cause. Her hair was a glorious wreck, her dress was wrinkled beyond salvation, and her cheeks were flushed a shade of red that had nothing to do with shyness. I cracked the window an inch. The air that came in was cold and smelled of judgment. "Evening, fellas." "Little late for a barn raising, ain't it?" The man's eyes, cold and hard as ball bearings, were locked on Hannah. "Hannah," he said, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through the glass. It sounded like gravel being dragged over stone. Thy rumspringa is over. The world of the English has poisoned thy spirit. Come home, now. Father, she whispered, shrinking back in her seat. So this was Dad, Jebediah. He looked like he could wrestle a bear and complain that the bear wasn't trying hard enough. Whoa there, Pops, I said, trying to sound a whole lot cooler than I felt. No poisoning going on here, just giving the little lady a lift, showing her the sights, educational. Jebediah's laser beam gaze shifted to me. It felt like being audited by God. You will release my daughter, English. This is not your concern. Hannah looked from her father's stony face to me. I saw the panic in her eyes, but underneath it, there was a flicker of that same fire I'd seen earlier. The fire that fixed my engine. The fire that wanted to go to Vegas. She leaned close to my ear, her voice a frantic, urgent whisper. Samuel, do you trust me? Darlin', after what you did with that hairpin, I'd trust you to fly this truck to the moon. When I open my door, she whispered, her breath hot on my neck, I will create a distraction. You will start the engine. Do not put it in gear. Floor the accelerator for 3 full seconds, then pop the clutch in first gear. The unburnt fuel in the exhaust manifold will create a percussive event, a backfire, a massive eardrum-shattering backfire. The girl was a goddamn demolition expert, a beautiful, mad genius. You got it, Professor, I whispered back, a grin spreading across my face. This was getting better than Vegas. She took a deep breath. She looked her father dead in the eye. I am not coming home, Father. I wish to see the world. Then she did something I never ever would have expected. She shoved her passenger door open, hard. It didn't hit him, but it made Jebediah and his 2 stooges jump back. At the same time, she let out a torrent of what I could only assume was Pennsylvania Dutch. It was fast, angry, and judging by the look on Jebediah's face, it was the kind of language that would get you kicked out of a barn, raising for life. That was my cue. I turned the key. Bertha roared to life. I stomped my boot on the gas pedal, holding it to the floor. The engine screamed, a high-pitched wail of protest, dumping raw, unburnt diesel into the exhaust system. 1, 2, 3. I kicked the clutch, jammed the gear shift into first, and let the clutch fly. Kaboom! A cannonball of fire and black smoke erupted from my twin-chrome exhaust stacks. It wasn't just a backfire, it was a declaration of war. It sounded like the 4th of July, and Armageddon had a baby. The 3 Amish men hit the dirt, like they were trained soldiers, yelling in shock and terror, hands over their heads. I didn't hesitate. I dropped the hammer. The tires shrieked on the gravel, spitting rocks like machine gun fire. Big Bertha lunged forward like a rhino with its tail on fire, and we shot back onto the dark highway. In the rearview mirror, I saw them scrambling back to their minivan. Headlights flashed on. The chase was on. They're coming after us, I yelled over the beautiful roar of the engine. Hannah was laughing, a wild, hysterical, absolutely joyous laugh. Faster, Samuel, faster. It was the most ridiculous chase in human history. A black minivan versus a fully loaded 18-wheeler on a winding mountain road. He was quicker in the turns, his little van hugging the curves like it was on rails. But I had the raw horsepower on the straights. He'd gain on me in a hairpin, his headlights burning holes in my mirrors. Then I'd pull away on a straight stretch, Bertha's engine bellowing defiance into the night. He knows these roads like his own hand, Hannah shouted. There's a shortcut he can take. He will try to cut us off at the old bridge up ahead. I can't outrun him in these turns. He's too nimble, I yelled, wrestling with the giant steering wheel. You do not have to, she yelled, a crazy, brilliant gleam in her eye. She dove under the dashboard, her skirt flying up. I heard her fumbling around near the fuse panel. There is a manual override for the trailer's air brakes. I saw the schematic on the fuse box cover. It's for testing. On the next sharp right turn, when I tell you, hit the truck's brakes hard, just for a second. It will make the trailer fishtail. You're certifiably insane, I shouted. But I was grinning like a Cheshire cat. This was the most fun I'd had since, well, ever. Trust me? Her muffled voice came from the footwell. We came screaming towards a sharp right-hander, a cliff on one side and a rock wall on the other. The minivan was practically kissing our back bumper, its high beams trying to blind me. Now, Samuel, she screamed. I stomped on the brakes. The whole rig shuddered. From the floor, Hannah yanked a lever. There was a hideous, tortured screech of 16 tires locking up on asphalt as she activated the trailer brakes independently. The trailer, now acting like a whip, kicked out wide. The minivan, expecting me to take the turn normally, was caught completely by surprise. My trailer swung out like a giant's fly swatter, and the corner of my heavy steel bumper gave the minivan's front fender a firm, decisive nudge. It was beautiful, a masterpiece of physics and redneck engineering. The minivan did a graceful, slow-motion pirouette and came to a gentle stop, nose first in a field of what I can only assume was more corn, safe, sound, and hopelessly stuck in the mud. Hannah popped up from the floor, her hair a beautiful disaster, a triumphant grin plastered on her face. Did the percussive event work as planned? I looked in the mirror at the minivan, sitting peacefully in the field, its headlights pointing uselessly at the stars. Jebediah and his boys were getting out, looking more bewildered than angry. I started to laugh. I couldn't help it, a deep, gut-busting, tear-streaming laugh that filled the whole cab. Hannah joined in, her laughter like silver bells ringing in a hurricane. We were two certified lunatics, barreling down a mountain road in a giant truck, having just outsmarted the Amish mafia with a hairpin, a backfire, and a trailer whip. She climbed back into her seat, leaned over the console, and planted a big, greasy, wonderful, triumphant kiss right on my mouth. She pulled back, her blue eyes shining brighter than any city lights. "So, Samuel McCarty," she said, her voice full of delicious mischief. "About this Las Vegas," I looked at the open road ahead, a black ribbon disappearing into the darkness. I looked at the crazy, brilliant, beautiful woman in my passenger seat. Her bonnet was still dangling from my mirror, a trophy from a battle well won. My rig smelled like diesel, cheap perfume, and pure, unadulterated freedom. My delivery schedule was shot to hell, but some deliveries are more important than others. I put my arm around her, pulled her close, and pushed the throttle to the floor. "Hang on tight, gearhead," I said, my voice rumbling with the engine. Next stop, the land of neon and wonderfully bad decisions. And that, my friends, is how a simple burger run turned into the greatest damn road trip of my life. I ended up with a mechanical goddess in my passenger seat, a busted suspension, an engine held together by a prayer and a hairpin, and probably a lifetime ban from every farmer's market in the state of Pennsylvania. Totally worth it.